Hello Anubis, my name is Rick Malava. My nickname in the forums is CTBRAM, and I was looking at your forum post here on how you would UV and texture map this project that you're working on, which, by the way, with just the procedural textures you have on it right now, looks pretty good. But if you want to actually do actually texture paint this, you're going to have to create UVs for it. And although I can't help you with the texture painting because I'm not a very good digital painter, I can show you how you could lay out the UVs for this, or how I would lay the UVs out for this. This is actually a good project, a good first project to learn how to use the UVing tools in Maya, because this is very uncomplicated to do this particular shape. This procedure that I'm going to show you works for any kind of a shape like this that's a cylindrical shape or a pipe shape like this, like a wheel, for instance, or a tire. What we're going to do is we're going to planar map the front and the back face of this pipe, and then we're going to come in and cylindrical map the inner rim and the outer rim that you see right here. So to get started, I've created a simple polygon pipe here that represents your model, and I want to first I've deleted all of the UVs on this, so if I come and I open the UV editor, if I go to the perspective, the way that I got that split screen mode is I went to the show outliner and perspective view, and then came down here, and on that left little drop down arrow I switched it to UV texture editor. So the left side is now the texture editor and the right side is the perspective view. So in the perspective view, the first thing I want to do is UV map this front and back face, all the front and back faces. So I'm going to click one face and an adjacent face, double click, and then pick a face and an adjacent face and double click. Make sure you don't have any of the outer rim and the inner rim selected. And I want to do a planar map, so I want to project normal to these faces here. So that is, if we look at our little manipulator down here, our little axis manipulator, we see we want to project our planar projection along the x-axis. So to actually create the UVs, you can go in the polygon tool set and you can go to this create UV drop down bar, and this shows the different types of projections you can do: planar, cylindrical, spherical, and automatic. 99% of the time I use planar. The next most often form of mapping I use is cylindrical, and then the third most common sometimes is I'll use automatic. But for this project we're just going to look at planar and cylindrical. So I can select it there. The other thing is I like to use a marking menu, so if I hold the space bar down I can come down here to create UVs, and let's do a planar map, but let's go to its options. We want to make sure that we're projecting along the x-axis, and then hit apply. And you can see the little projection tool comes up, and you can see all the faces are now projected into this 0 to 1 UV space. Now the only problem we have now is that the front faces are sitting right on top of the back faces, and if we come into my into the UV editor here window, the way that I can tell, one of the ways that I can tell that is that all of these faces are this purple color. If you come up here, you'll see a box, an open box and a filled box, and if I unclick that, this just shows the UVs. If I click it, it not only shows me the UVs, but it shows me what direction the normals for those UVs are facing. If the normals are facing toward me, which you want, the color will be blue. If they're facing away from you, they'll be red. So the first thing we need to do is separate these two shells, since they're sitting right on top of one another. So if I go to UV selection mode by holding the right mouse button down and sliding over to UV, and I pick a single UV, don't drag select at this point, and then I hold the control key down and the right mouse button and I go to to shell, it now picks an entire UV shell. This is the front and the back faces are not connected to each other, so their UVs are separate. When I selected that shell and I hit the W key now, I can move that one shell off of the other shell, and I clearly picked a UV on the back shell because all of the faces are red, so they're not facing the correct way. So to get these guys facing the right way, I want to flip them. I either want to flip this whole thing across the horizontal axis or flip it across the vertical axis. Really doesn't matter to me. I want to keep the top on the top though, so I'm going to flip it across the vertical axis, and you do that by clicking on this little widget up here that has like 3 dots vertical and 2 dots horizontal, so it represents flipping it across the vertical axis. So I do that, and now the back faces are now facing me. So you've now successfully UV'd the front and the back of this object, and that's as easy as it is. Now if I want to select the entire shell, you notice before I picked one UV, then I had the control key down, and then the right mouse button, and then to shell. If you want to do this in a single click, there's some tools that you have up here. This tool, the ones you use most frequently are these top three. Right now I'm just going to look at the Move UV Shell tool. If I activate that and I click on any of these things and just drag them, it automatically picks the whole shell in one shot. So what I'm going to do initially here is I'm going to drag select both of these guys and just pull them off to the side so that we can now map the inner and outer rims. So just like before, we're going to select all the faces on the outer rim and all the faces on the inner rim. And now we're going to do a cylindrical projection. So we come over here to, once again, create UVs, or we come up here to create UVs and go down to cylindrical projection. Now there are no options of any significance in here, so I rarely have to open this other than to make sure that you want it to be set to its defaults. Okay, so close that, and so what we can do here is just simply come up and create UVs and say cylindrical. Now the little cylindrical projection tool pops up, and it is always going to be set up such that the cylinder is wrapped around the y-axis, which you can see right here. Here's our little manipulator, and it's wrapping around that y-axis. It's also going to just be half of a cylinder. If you want to get the entire cylindrical projection, you grab this little handle here and you drag it until it closes. And now I'm keeping the UV editor window open because you can see that the UVs are being UV'd, but they're really messed up. And that's because we're projecting around the cylinder here, right? It's projecting radially from the center out to the cylinder in all directions, which is clearly not lined up with the faces that we want to project. We really want this cylinder here to be rotated along the z-axis so that its center runs through the center of this pipe. And to do that, what we're going to do is you'll notice there's no manipulator to rotate anything. So you don't hit the hotkeys to do normal rotation. What you do is you come down here, you'll see this little triangle or this little diamond shape, and in the middle you'll see this little red T. If you click on the little red T and you come back out, you'll notice that a global manipulator pops up, and or a universal manipulator pops up, so you can do translate, scale, and the cyan represents rotate. So very carefully click it and try not to drag it, because whichever plane you're looking in, if you drag it, you'll jiggle the cylindrical projection tool off center. So what I want to do is I want to basically rotate this so that it's looking, and if you look in the left window as I'm doing this, you can see the UVs are getting straighter and straighter and straighter and straighter until I'm looking straight down the center of the cylinder, and they're pretty much perfectly straight. Now if I come into the channel box here, I can take the rotation. You see that I did jiggle a little bit because it's off. I can take these guys and set them to 0, and take this guy and set it to -90. Boom, and now it's looking perfectly down the center of this pipe, and you can see all the UVs that wrap around the outer rim and the inner rim are now unwrapped and laid out perfectly straight for us. But once again, they're sitting on top of one another. So if I go into this window now, once again I can pick my shell selection tool and just pick this shell and pull it apart, right? And I can take this shell. Well, it looks like it still might be a little off. Either the cylinder, either I moved the pipe, or I didn't quite get the cylinder right. But it's not going to be enough to worry about. What I can do, if you want it, well, no, it's not enough to worry about. Just leave it like it is. You can actually straighten it out a little bit by going and using, see these 4 tools up here, the 2 horizontal ones. If I selected all these UVs, I could say make them all horizontal and move them up to the highest UV in this line of UVs that I've selected. And I selected, I'm still in the universal tool. To get out of this universal, or the move tool, you just hit the Q button. And then I just want to select these UVs at the top, and I can straighten them out. And then these UVs at the bottom, and I can straighten those out. Okay, and then I can come here and pick these UVs. First of all, I can take this whole shell, control right mouse to shell, and let's flip it left to right, so across the vertical axis like that. And then let's take all of these UVs at the bottom and let's straighten those out, and all of these UVs at the top, and straighten those out. And there you go. Now it's perfectly straight. So we've got the whole thing UV'd now. Now the last remaining thing to do is fit all of the UVs into this 0 to 1 texture space here. So I'm going to pull these guys up here. And the reason you want to fit it into the 0 to 1 texture space is when you, by default, when you place a texture map onto an object, it basically maps all of the textures or the UVs that are just in this quadrant. You can actually put UVs into any of these quadrants. In fact, this quadrant of your UV space is duplicated over and over out to infinity, so you could have pieces of your UV map even out into this area out here. But that's a whole nother tutorial on how to actually get those UVs from those other UV regions to be mapped onto your object. So for a beginner, stick with just putting all of your UVs into this 0 to 1 space here and try to pack them in as tightly as you can. The other thing to keep in mind is something called texture density or pixel density. If you had a 1K by 1K map, that means that your entire texture in this 0 to 1 space is going to be 1024 pixels by 1024 pixels, and you'll notice that this grid is broken up into 10 UV squares. So that means that for a 1K map, each of these squares is 100 pixels by 100 pixels. And you can see that each of these squares, for instance, is roughly like pretty close to 2 of these texture squares by 1 of the texture squares. So this would be, in a 1K map, this would be about 200 pixels by 100 pixels. If you needed more than that, you'd need to make a bigger map. So a 2K map would mean that this would be 4K pixels by 2K pixels. I'm sorry, 400 pixels by 200 pixels. So for this one, I'm going to do a 1K map, and if you needed more space, you could make it bigger. If you needed less space, you can make it smaller. So let's get on to putting these guys into here. So the other thing to keep in mind is I'm moving these into the 0 to 1 space. You want, right now when they've been UV'd, they all have the same relative pixel density, so you want to avoid, for a single object, taking pieces of its UV and scaling them independently. You'll get different pixel densities, and sometimes that can cause a problem. So what I'm saying is, when I scale this thing to fit it in here, I want to always scale everything together. So I think the most efficient way is to put the front face up here, the back face into this corner, and then put these outer and inner rims up into these areas that you'll see at the top and bottom. You'll see what I mean here in a second. Let's pick the 2 shell thing and sort of get it in the general vicinity of what we're trying to do here. Something like that. Then pick everything together and hit the scale button and scale until it all, and I'm just switching between W and R here, move tool and the scale tool. And the idea is you want to pack these in as tight as you can so that you maximize your pixel density on these guys. So that's about as tight as I can get the 2 circles, but I can actually now take them, or the front and back faces, I can now take them and move them to give myself a little bit more room here to get these guys in. So I can put this guy here. It won't let me stack them on top of each other, so I got to be careful. Put that down a little more. See, if I try to stack it on top, it automatically says, no, I don't want you to do that. So there we go. And then take this one and put it right there. And there you go. You've successfully UV'd the entire object. Now the next and last step is to simply get it out to Photoshop so that you can paint on it. And to do that, we're going to create a, go to the Polygon tab here, and we're going to go to UV Snapshot. And I'm going to put my UV, once again I said I'm going to create a 1024. And because I've got Keep Aspect Ratio on, it'll also set the other, the Y scale to be the same. So this is a 1K texture map. I'm going to make the actual edges that it displays in the UV texture map, I want them to paint in white. I want it to anti-alias the lines so they're smooth, and you can pick various formats. I tend to either pick JPEG or PNG, so we'll stick with JPEG on this one. And then I want to put it on my desktop. It tries to put it in your last project, which isn't where I want this to go, so I'm going to go Browse, Desktop, and I'm going to put it into just a file called example UV and .jpg. Save. So there you go, and I just hit OK. Oop. I don't have the object selected right now, so if I come out here and select the object and then say OK, there you go. It created a file on my desktop called example UV JPEG. Okay, so here you go. Here's the file that we saved out, example uv.jpg, and this shows the UVs for the front and the back, or the front and the back of the pipe, and the outer and the inner rim surfaces are all there. Now all that remains is to take this UV snapshot, bring it into Photoshop, and then you can actually create a layer. You can take and create a new layer, and you can set the right blending modes here, and you can start using these UVs as a template or a guide as to where to paint your information for the pipe. And then once you've painted in all your information, you can turn off the UV snapshot, export the file out, and then import that back into another material, and then put that material on your object. So the painting part of it, I'm really, as I said, not a good digital painter, so I can't help you much, but this at least shows you how to get it, create the UVs initially, and then get the UVs into Photoshop, and you're now ready to go on to the next stage, which will be painting. And some of the guys on the site that are better at painting, like Dom, might be able to help you out with that, but this will get you at least to the UV part. I hope this helps you out, and good luck with your texturing and your project.